Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. So happy to welcome Jeff Graham. He is the superintendent of Canton City Schools. Good morning.
Good morning, Susie.
Well, we were saying so far not too many snow days this year.
Nope, we've had one, and it was debatable. But it was the main roads were fine, but the side streets were pretty dangerous. And because our kids walk in the streets, it thought it was best.
Because of time of year it is, what goes into making that decision? Who makes the call and when is that made and why?
Ultimately, I make the call, and we get up and start looking at things and driving the roads. Ted Ellsworth's out on the streets and giving me play-by-play sometimes on every street he is and or he's driving and exactly how bad they are. I ultimately make the decision, and it's based on, in essence, how safe we believe it's going to be for our kids to get to school. And sometimes that's tough to do when you're trying to predict a couple hours before school.
That's right.
But we do the best we can, and we always try to err on the side of what's safest for our children.
As a former teacher, we used to always pray for ice to hit right around 4:35 a.m. That seemed to be optimal for getting
good. Yep. Because, again, part of that is you have no idea what to predict when school starts. Now, if we knew exactly how things would be when kids go to school, it'd be easier, but we're trying to guess what that looks like.
Well, let's talk about things more important.
Sure.
Okay. But snow days are very important.
They are very important. Yes, they are.
You've got how many months in now? 7 months?
This is 7 months, yes.
So talk about your first impressions. What brought you? What interested you in the gig?
Actually, there's a longer story than you're probably asking in terms of what interested me in the gig. I was superintendent of the Woodridge Local Schools. I began in about 2003, and I was there till 2010. And during that time, we had a situation where our high school principal was diagnosed with leukemia and needed to be quarantined. By the way, he's fine.
that's
Cancer-free
good.
since.
Wonderful.
Excuse me. Our assistant principal also had to take a long-term medical leave, and we were looking for somebody to fill in. And a guy that I work with, Ed Rochong, who lives in Dalton, said, I know somebody who just retired and he might be interested. So long story short, Fred Blosser became our high school principal, and Fred is a superintendent in the Canton City Schools for many years. And the stories that I'm told, when he left, teachers cried. And
wow.
Actually, his name is brought up on a regular basis. He's truly an icon. But he and I became friends and talked a lot. He's somebody I admire incredibly. And I told him maybe 15 years ago that the Canton City Schools superintendency was my dream job.
Wow.
And and the reason is it's a very, very proud, resilient community who wants to be engaged, wants to be a part of the schools, and large in one sense, but has a small town feel to it. Everybody I meet from Canton City Schools is just proud to be from the Canton City Schools. So it's a community I want to be a part of.
Nobody wakes up and says, I think I want to be superintendent. You had to have done some teaching first and then felt drawn to this direction. Tell me a little bit about what brought you into education in the first place.
I did, and again, probably a longer story than you're asking for, but I was a teacher. I taught for 6.5 years. I got a job in January, and I was a high school physics teacher, taught science classes. Loved it. I coached football and track, loved it. And I got some advice early on that, if you're going to move on, don't wait till you're sick of what you're doing to do it. Seize the next opportunity. But not knowing what that was, I had a principal walk up, John Swires, and he said, Jeffrey, I thought about doing what I do for a living. And I said, John, I have no idea what you do. And he said, I have the opportunity to spend more time with the kids who need more time. Even thinking back to that time, I still kind of get the chills and that feeling in my stomach. And I needed 30-something graduate hours to make that happen. I went back and knocked it out in a year and was blessed to be hired as an assistant principal in Medina City Schools and became principal in Medina High School. And for me, it was just want to take that next step. And again, I appreciated the leadership piece, leading collaboratively, with those around you, and had an opportunity and was blessed to have been offered the superintendency in Woodridge. And then I was blessed to be offered the job in Parma, and then Lorain, and now in Canton. So again, a very blessed career.
Boy, with football background and Canton City Schools, how hard is it for you to stay seated?
We appreciate our football again. Yeah.
Yes. Boy, don't you feel yourself like wanting to get down there on the field and maybe doing a little coaching along the sideline?
No, I don't know nearly enough. That would not do any good by inserting my thoughts. No, we have great coaching staff and great kids, and it's a lot of fun to watch.
Have you already adopted that, and I want to say this in the most positive of ways, that great rivalry between Canton and Massillon?
It didn't
Is that
take long.
it's ingrained in most people who grew up around these parts?
It didn't take long, and it's something that you underappreciate. At least I underappreciated. Excuse me, knowing of it and reading about it and being impressed with it.
Yeah.
But until you live it, it's different because although football is the focal point, it's not about football. It's about bringing a community together and to celebrate one another. We just kind of do it about what's happening on that Friday night. But it's our band is out every night. Our cheerleaders are dancing. Yeah. Everybody is out. But again, our entire community comes out to celebrate our children. So although the focus and the stories are about football, it's so much deeper than that.
It is. Two communities that truly love one another, but have such a respect for each other. And that rivalry is amazing. Nothing like it in the country, I don't think, at the high school level. Would you agree?
Nothing I've ever experienced.
Well, let's talk about academics because
Sure.
we all know McKinley's got amazing para-academic schedules with sports and the arts and everything else that you promote. But let's talk a little bit about what happens in the classroom. Tell me about the kids. Tell me about the prep. And I'll preface this by saying I hear there is a new emphasis now in even preparing some students, not necessarily as college prep. That used to be the whole thing. But recognizing that we've got such a need for skilled laborers in the workforce, this is what I'm hearing, that has worked its way back into high schools again. Tell me what Canton is doing.
Suze, there's a whole lot of questions.
I know.
All
rolled into one.
Kind of rolled out on me.
Pick a question and answer that.
Maybe I'll go in reverse order because you
Okay.
talk about the trades. And
Yes.
it's more than that. We need to make sure that whatever path our children choose, our students choose, that they are being prepared for whatever they want to experience after high school.
Yes.
For a lot of our students, it's college. We need to encourage college. For a lot of our students, it's career tech. We need to encourage career tech. For a lot of our students, it's the trades. We need to encourage the trades. And I've met with some of our trades leaders. I actually met with Dave Curvin on Friday, Billy Shear a few weeks before, and to talk about exactly that. We need to strengthen our partnership. We need to make sure that their experts are in our classrooms introducing our children to opportunities that they have after high school. I'm meeting with different groups of people, and we have many different pockets of people who are all recognizing this at the same time and want to step up to the table and create something. So I think the time is right for us to create a workforce development comprehensive plan. And I've reached out to some similar districts to find out how they're doing it. But we have a lot of support from our community. We have a lot of support from higher ed. We have a lot of support from the people who need to be at the table to make that happen. So I would anticipate the right people have already met. We're talking some strategies and trying to make sure that we don't leave gaps in whatever plan we create. So I expect something to be done here very soon.
How does that happen? How do we get to know students well enough for those few hours that we see them every day in the classroom to know what their real aptitude is?
And part of it is helping us and them understand their aptitudes, but it's also helping us and them understand their passions and their interests and growing them in that path. So that's part of what we're talking about is we need to personalize our approach to education. So whether that comes from understanding aptitudes or passions, but we need to create those opportunities.
Is Common Core still a thing?
We call it different things, but it's still there, yeah.
And where does that fit into what you're doing at Canton City Schools?
Well, we have a state curriculum that we are required to follow, and we are following it. So it's where it fits into what we're doing is our teachers were pretty clear, and support staff and building level administrators were all very clear on what their needs were in those areas. And they need more resources from us. They need more supports from us. And they need to strengthen the opportunities that they have to take what is expected to teach, the standards, and how exactly to implement that in the most effective way in the classroom. So, again, it's been a very open, honest, and candid process for them telling us what they need. Then we try to provide it, and whether it's in terms of professional development or time, they will look for feedback, and sometimes we do well and sometimes we don't. But either way, it's an opportunity for us to kind of learn together.
Like a lot of things, I think the intentions are great. But I heard you say the word fit, and it almost seems I'll make a statement and then get your reaction to it. It almost seems like that is trying to make a student fit something rather than what you're talking about, making education fit that student.
Yeah. Our job is to identify needs, then meet needs, not create a program and squeeze a child into it.
Well, I'm with you on that. Yeah. Let's talk about the strategic plan that you're working on. That always is exciting.
Actually, it is, and it's something that's ongoing. So next year we'll modify as well because the whole opportunity or the whole purpose of this process is to listen, learn, and grow together. And what we did in the spirit of that early on, we did it two different ways for our community and our staff because we needed to, but it was to engage. It was first with our community, actually, and our staff. How do you want to receive information, and what information do you want to receive? Then you take that to the next level, and the next question is, okay, now how do we engage with one another? And with the community, things came out pretty quickly, and here are some things we expect. Did a State of the School address last week. From what I understand, maybe the first one, at least the first in a long time.
Wow.
Because the community expected it. They would say, Jeff, here's what we want. And our job is to, provide good customer service. With our staff, getting the information was a little more difficult. And what I mean by that, we did the surveys, and I discussed the academic side of that. Came out pretty quick. So we've been implementing our academic strategic plan now since September. But some things came out in terms of culture and climate. And it was very clear that our staff, our culture and climate was not as healthy as we'd like it to be. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the next question was why? You can't create a plan around feelings, so you have to find out why people feel the way they do. So the next opportunity was sit down and tell us. So we created focus groups. And we had the leaders of all our 6 unions were present. We had administrative leaders. We tried to have all of our different groups of staff members represented. And they pretty consistently said, we're not doing that because we don't trust you. And that's fair, right? I'm new, and there's processes. And for whatever reason, there's a lack of trust. We say, okay, then what is the best way to do it? And they said, well, we trust these people. So we trained those people. And then we got out of the way.
Who were those people?
A group of people that they all collectively, it was staff members. Mm-hmm. So different people and different.
They'd been around, they had more history.
Excuse me, exactly. So I got to know you for the last 20 years, and I know you to be honorable. Therefore, you're somebody I will speak to. And then we went through the process and why do you feel these ways? And eventually, after you ask why enough times, there's a cause, a root cause to why people feel the way they do. And we went through different paths and all those whys, the 5 whys. And at the end of the day, we came up with the root causes. And then we determined which one of those causes would have the greatest impact on our overall culture and climate. And we're in the final stages of polishing that up. So we have it. We send it out to people to get some feedback on what we think we understood and what we heard, and that we're representing our strategies in the appropriate ways. Then we'll get that information back and we'll act on it.
Is there anything in that discovery that you would be able to share with us?
Our issues were, when it came down to it, equity, and that's a much longer conversation than we may have today, but it comes down to making sure that all of our students and all of our staff and our families have equal access to opportunities.
Yes.
And when you look at issues of poverty, and that's an issue in the Canton City Schools, according to the Strengthening Stark report, the children of Canton, we have the highest child poverty rate in the country. So
40%.
That's a challenge that we face. So we need to make sure that we're providing access to opportunities that those students otherwise wouldn't have, or because of our struggles that our teachers wouldn't otherwise have. So we're trying to identify those gaps and fill those gaps. So equity was a piece, leadership was another piece, and we're trying to develop a culture of collaborative leadership. We all have a say, and we have our teachers and our support staff members are at every table when we're making decisions to make sure that the right voice is heard in the right ways and to hear all the different perspectives.
Awesome. Well, you do have your work cut out for
you.
you.
But we have good people, so everything else is easy.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
You do have great people, great families,
really
and wonderful
Yes.
teachers and wonderful staff. Looking at the clock, we do need to take a short break,
Right.
but we are speaking with Jeff Graham. He is the still relatively new superintendent of Canton City Schools. Lots more to talk about, so don't go away. Stay with us. You're listening to Our Community. Welcome back to Our Community. Susie Thomas having a talk with Jeff Graham from Canton City Schools. We were talking about the families and the teachers and thinking about the wonderful families that live in the city, which is getting to be fewer and fewer. It is smaller and smaller. But they are working hard, and many of them holding down 2-3 jobs to make ends meet, to provide for their families. It makes it difficult for them to have some spare time to let the schools know what's on their mind as well. How does that work? How do you navigate that to be able to really get input from the families that's so important?
And again, a few things there. First is the opportunity piece and that's why we did our communications audit to begin the school year. How do you want to receive information and what information do you want to receive? And then how do you engage? So I guess the short answer to How do we do it? Is we ask people how they want to do it, and then we honor that. So what came from that are more opportunities. I'll be out in the community more. And again, there's a levy coming up soon, so that's part of it. But I don't want people to think that we're changing our behavior because of the levy. This is who we're going to be moving forward. And I'll be out in the community. I'm after March 17th, still engaging, and people invite me to places, and I'll come and we'll talk about whatever they want to talk about. Listen, please.
I'm so glad you said the date of it. This is not a May election this time. This is happening in March,
That's
which
correct.
is why we're talking about it right now. So remind everybody that date again, because we want to make sure we're out and supporting.
It's March 17th. Thanks, Susie. March 17th, and we have a 7.9 mil levy on the ballot, which generates $5.1 million for the district. And I think the question that I'm asked most is about how money was spent in the past. The reason we need a levy is because every 5 years you need to go back to your taxpayers for levies, because that's how schools are funded. But since we haven't gone back since 2011, so we've actually stretched that out a few years. But again, it comes back. People challenge how we spent our money in the past. And being the new guy, people tell me something, and I can't respond to it immediately. So I go back and I do my homework and I look to see what we did and why we said we'd do it. And I've not found it to be bad decisions. I think that we invested in a lot of things that made perfect sense. But sometimes you make investments in things that make perfect sense and they don't always pay off. We do that as in business. We do that as parents. We do that as in all aspects of life. So again, one example is the transportation piece, and it's the one I give the most often. We changed our transportation from, if you lived a mile out, then we provide a bus to you for school. If you lived less than a mile from your school, then you had to walk. That changed to a quarter mile, which means we'd transport a lot more students. And there's a big price tag with that. But it wasn't a waste of money. It made perfect sense. If the goal, and the goals were, as I understand it, to increase attendance and to decrease the number of our students who are choosing to leave our district to go somewhere else. And as a result of those two things, that there would be an increase in student achievement. Well, after 5 years of looking at it, it didn't bear fruit. So there's a business side to this, and we could either continue that and cut somewhere else, or we could go back to what we went to. So the decision made perfect sense to go to a quarter mile. It just didn't pay off. And the more examples I get, I go back and look, and in my mind, the decisions that we made perfect sense. And just like the decisions we're making now, we'll need to tweak next year and the year after and the year after, because we can implement a best practice and we can even do it the right way. But sometimes we need to adjust our sails to make sure we're behaving in a way that's the most effective and the most respectful to our taxpayers.
Is this a renewal, or is this
No, this
new
is
money?
new money. This is new money.
And so transportation is one of the places that you're putting it. Are there some other areas?
Yeah, last year we made $7.6 million worth of cuts, and part of that was transportation. So that new model was implemented this year. Now, candidly, I think we need to go back and look at that again. It was explained to me that things are different now than they were 5 years ago. And again, being the new guy, helped me understand.
Yeah.
And I met with a lot of parents and listened to a lot of concerns, a lot of staff members. And the one thing I can't get past is they say it's not as safe as it used to be. And help me understand. And
what is not as safe?
Walking to school for a child, a 6 or 7 year old child, to walk a mile to school is not as safe now. That was their argument as it was 6, 7 years ago. And the data doesn't support that from the safety person, from the data at the police department or in the schools. But the one piece that I struggle with is that right now we have the sister school concept. So we have our kids walking from one school zone, if for lack of a better phrase, to another. And our school zones are also defined by gang boundaries. So sometimes,
what?
Yeah, so a lot of times it is less safe for a parent to walk their child to school because there are.
Can't even believe we're saying this. Yes.
So there are some things that we need to consider and adjust, and safety is number one. So we have to come up with a way that makes the most sense to make sure our kids are safe as they can be.
Absolutely, yes. Well, and it's not like we're talking about 100 years ago where Grandma and Grandpa walked 2 miles uphill both ways to their one-room schoolhouse. It is a different world, and you do have to take that all into consideration. There are many after-school programs. I'm thinking of Tikva, I'm thinking of the Martin Center, a lot of after-school programs in Canton City that, for one thing, help address the gang issue and offer a lot of great opportunities to kids in their after-school time. How closely does Canton City Schools work with these after-school programs? We
have a number of programs, and I don't want to ramble them off because I'll forget a couple, and I don't want to be disrespectful to our partners. But our goal is, but I will mention one that's a new one. It's a pretty big one. Boys and Girls Club of America.
Oh, yeah, awesome.
They just started here a couple weeks ago, and I expect that to grow exponentially over a very short period of time. And what makes them different is the fact that there's also a tutoring component. So there's the
Wonderful.
come on in, and there's the release some energy. The students get fed. There's a reading and a math component. There's a STEM component. But it's an opportunity to keep our kids in our buildings and off our streets. As you mentioned, the goal is to make sure our kids are good for as long as we can. As long as we can. So we have a number of programs, and it's when you talk about the wraparound services, the equity piece, access to opportunities. This is one of those.
I'm thinking of some other programs that try to address on the other end readiness, and the library does quite a bit,
Yes.
and some other area
We have
organizations.
our list of partners is a very, very long one, and again, our goal is to enhance those partnerships and to create new ones.
Are you finding that the children coming into kindergarten are ready to be there?
No, I mean academically and
Okay.
behaviorally they're not. And again, that's one of the challenges when you work in a district of poverty. But I think we need to make sure that we understand that it's not because the parents don't care. And
right.
I hear that far too often. And there's a lot, and I quoted this in my State of the Schools address. There's an overwhelming amount of data. They started studies back in the 70s, and for the last 50 years, the people in poverty, families of poverty, parents in poverty value education just as much as parents who are wealthy. The difference is access to opportunity. So again, there are challenges that our parents face. And you mentioned before, you could be in a single family home and you live with mom, and mom has 3 jobs.
Yes.
So there's some things that get in the way of preparation. And it's not because you're poor. It's what is statistically more likely to occur as a result of poverty. And those are some of the examples. And having access to a library in school or
Yes.
at home, a bunch of different books, or
Right.
the video games that help teach you how to read. And there are some things that our families don't have access to, and our job is to help create that.
Let's talk about food security. One of the things, you can't teach a child much if they're hungry. How are we taking care of that for the families?
Yeah, great question, Susan. Actually, Representative Tom West asked me that question, and I've probably been on the job about 3 weeks at the time. And he said, what are you doing for after school? And I said, I have no idea. Let me call it. Again, I don't know. So let me look into it.
I'll find out.
So I called Tad Ellsworth, our business manager, and right after I was on the phone with Tom, he said, Jeff, I've already got a plan. Tad had a plan in his back pocket, and he threw it down on the table. And we began to plan for it to execute it the right way. But we currently offer dinner in all of our schools. So if you're a student who participates in an extracurricular activity at the high school or middle school, we'll give you a snack to get you through practice. And then afterwards, there's dinner. So just like our school lunches, but a little bit more elaborate because it's a dinner plan. And again, Tad also had the plan in place to implement a food truck in the summer. So we will drive a food truck around and feed hungry children. We'll take the truck to where the kids are.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you need for that, to make that happen? Volunteers and money and all of the above?
And again, I appreciate it's actually there are a bunch of different things that schools receive money for, and the one that I'm talking about now is for food. And there's federal money that comes in, the school lunches, and the only thing we're allowed to spend that money on is food. And we do have a surplus of money. We're actually doing very well in that fund, which is a testament to our food service leadership and TAD, that there's enough money to pull this program off the right way and doesn't cost the district anything because we're only spending the money that we're only allowed to spend on food.
Yes.
So this is not part of – so this has no impact on our levy. This has no impact on anything. It's just the right thing to do. And
that's been earmarked for that, and you have enough.
Exactly. And luckily, because of the leadership that we've had in this district for the past however many years, there's enough money there to do this the right way. And eventually, right now it's in our high school and middle schools, and very soon it'll be in all of our schools. But because a lot of our elementary schools don't have kitchens, we have to figure out how to do that or take some of this money and invest it in kitchen equipment.
That is just awesome. All right, if I wrote this down right, you said the plan involves what you're working on is to listen, to learn, and to grow together.
Always.
Listening, we kind of covered. You really were listening, taking an input from the community. What have you learned?
And that's a great. Actually, we just had this conversation a few times in the past couple of days. And for me, it's one of those things. You talk about listen. I don't know enough to have an opinion. I'm beginning to know enough to have an opinion on some things. So for some areas, I know a process I want to follow to get to answers. because we have something that we need to make better. On other things, there are things that we just recognize we need to improve. The recognition of wraparound services. Again, our kids need health care. Our kids need dental care. Our kids need, again, access to vision care and to the food. And so we're creating plans to make those things happen.
Okay, now what I've heard
Jump in, please.
on the
Yes.
street is that there are actually people who provide those services that are willing to come into the schools and provide them on the grounds. Is that what we're talking about?
We have some of those things now.
That's
My goal is to have that to be more consistent. So
Yes.
if, in the example that I've given before, if my daughter gets sick, I take a day off work and I take her to the doctor, and then I take her to the pharmacy to get her medicine. Then I take her home, and we sit there for 2 or 3 days until she's healthy. Then she goes back to school, and I go back to work.
Yes. That's
A lot of
not
our families-
available to everybody.
No, a lot of families don't have access to that. And
Right.
let's go back to that mom that we talked about that has 3 jobs. She has the choice of missing 3 days of work and not being able to pay the heat bill, or hoping that her child can suck it up and will be okay in a couple of days.
Right.
And that leads to chronic absenteeism. It leads to a lot of different things. But so right now we have access to some of that. What I want to do is strengthen those partnerships and elaborate on the opportunities that our people we serve have.
That's awesome. All right, dream with me.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's look at 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What will Canton City Schools look like?
It'll be a place that I think have the structures and systems and people in place to provide access to the people we serve, access to the same opportunities that those of the privileged have.
And how do we get from here to there?
By engaging the right people. And as I mentioned earlier, when you surround yourself with the right people, everything's pretty easy. I'm in a lot of meetings where people don't want to talk about things in public yet because we're not far enough along. But we have an incredibly caring community when it comes to people who want to jump in and help. More and more now that I'm starting to meet people and get connected to people, I'm hearing from folks, okay, Jeff, what can I do? I want to be involved in a meaningful way. And those people will get connected to other people, and eventually we need to structure it, organize it, and then empower. And
What
we're gonna be
person
just
have
fine.
you met so far that just really grabbed your heartstrings and this is why you do what you do?
Since I've been in Canton, wow, which person? That's not fair.
Or just one of many?
I'll tell you what, because he's one of the first people I met, and he's still way at the top of the list, but I don't want to be disrespectful to so many other people that fit that same description. Ron Ponder, very, very candid conversation, closed the door, just talked about a lot of things, talked from his heart, said, Jeff, here's what you need to do, and here's some thoughts and some things to consider. We have, and again, the list is a long one. Actually, now I'm being overwhelmed with names and faces.
No, but good man.
He also, in many ways, that's what his approach and his candor is pretty consistent with those in Canton. I mean, everybody
Yes.
says very open and honest about what they think and what they feel, and they care about what matters.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time today. We've gotten to spend this time with Jeff Graham. He is the superintendent of Canton City Schools. And Jeff, thank you for all you do.
Can I add?
Yes.
Again, people
Yes,
being overwhelmed.
please,
I
yes.
can't. And again, I can't. Fred Blosser. I can't.
Oh, absolutely.
Can't not include him in that conversation. Again,
Yes.
somebody that has been a mentor of mine now for 15 years and then some. Tom McDaniels is somebody else that has just been
yes.
outstanding. But again, if I need
Yeah, we'd be here
2
another.
more, was it 13 and a half minute segments or whatever it is? So get me on and I'll get the list of names and I might need to take on both segments next
And
time.
all the rest of you, you know who you are.
Exactly. Thanks.
Thank you for all you do in our community.
Susie, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.